So the beauty of working digitally is when you have a scene like this where you kind of have some of the elements replicated, you don't have to draw them over and over again. You can just copy and paste. If you were to do this traditionally, you can just basically take a semi-translucent piece of paper, tracing paper essentially, and trace or put the thing on there that you're gonna be able to trace multiple times, and then just put it. So if you have a light box, you have your Bristol board paper, and then you put the sketch paper underneath the Bristol, and you just basically when you have the light, it shines through so you can see the door, and then you just draw that door on the top, and then you just move it over and do it again, and move it over and do it again because it's the same thing. Like you could
Mhm.
always, if you wanted to change up the elements slightly so that it feels like it's like a living thing, you could always do that. Um, but this is just a way for you to change, or to save time.
Mhm.
It's also done in, if you're a storyboard artist or if you're an animation where you have like something that's moving slightly, and you don't want to have to redraw the same part of it that hasn't really moved, but somebody's talking, but they're kind of like in the same position. Maybe they're moving their head, but their body's the same. You could do the same thing, right? So it's just another way for you to save a bit of time where you don't really need to redraw things um, from your imagination, right? You can just use it as a reference type thing.
Well, I think your comment about animation was a neat one because that's almost what this section sort of feels like, right? Like, it's almost got that animated element to it where there is the static door that never moves and never gives up, and, Sam kind of just moving slightly day in, day out, trying to see if he can figure this out. It almost feels a little bit like an animated sequence.
Yeah. And now here's the thing, we haven't talked about color
Mhm,
or value or anything like that too much, at least. So in
mhm,
this case, because we have Sam as a consistent kind of uh like a I guess just a black shape, a
mhm.
silhouette, slightly moved every single time, but like I guess there's a scenario where, because how much time is passing, would you say here? What are we saying? Days or
I would say it almost feels like it would be kind of like day, night, midday, like, so, like, there feels like it's not just, like, a few minutes, it feels like a day has passed, so it's almost like you would see sort of, like, sunrise, sunset, for lack of a better way of explaining it, over the course of what would be a few days, like, Sam has sort of had multiple times of just staring at this door at different times of day.
okay, so in that case, what I would do then is show through light, like value. You can
Mhm.
see here slightly different poses, maybe just showing their, like confusion or what have you. But
Yeah.
so by panel three, a lot of that light is now moves. So right, the first one, they're in complete darkness, or like the room is dark for
Yep.
whatever reason. So maybe I would add some lines here to make it feel like the door itself is also darkened, and then I would use value, darken it as well. Um, and then here on the second panel, and we can see that there's like light edging towards the back
Mhm.
of the back side. You can do the same thing with the door here. We can see that there's a bit of light now hitting the door, but it's not completely. So wherever in the room the light has completely hit the full door, right?
Mhm.
Remember we had that window that was coming in. That's
Exactly.
important.
Yep.
And then now we've got, there would be some heavier some heavier light coming in um, on the side of them, and now maybe this next one, they're um, closer to the door, right? We have
Mhm.
them kind of uh, like almost like they're down on the ground. So I have to figure out what that looks like. So maybe they're a little bit smaller, so it feels like they're actually closer to the door there. You can see them. And again, there's not a lot of shadow on them this time. It's almost like it's full
Mhm.
day. Um, and then maybe this last one, would you say we go back to like being night again or
Yeah, I
being
think so.
shadow?
Yeah, because that even just quickly looking at that, it does feel like some significant time has passed between the first and the final panel.
Yeah. There's a doorknob there and having them holding on to the doorknob or something like as if, they
Yeah, like, giving it one
just,
more try.
yeah, it's something like that. Um, Putting a little shadow on the door from that.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is all going to be like, this is all just kind of as a lot of this is going to be worked out when you get to the rough pencils,
Mhm.
the form. Right now, because I'm working at such a small size and I'm not zooming in super close, I just want to get the composition to the point where I'm like, yes, this I like this composition. I'm starting to see the forms
Mhm.
and the way that the shadows are on the person. So I'm going to go back and change some of this stuff here, just as I'm working, just so that we have like as ideas come to me where I'm going, oh, you know what, I should probably make this feel like they're it's dark behind them, right?
Right.
And do that to just add a little bit of an atmosphere to it. Um,
Yes.
and then now going back here, thinking about okay, there's got to be a shadow. Maybe there's like a shadow from them holding onto the door. It's
Ooh, I
they're
like that.
close enough to the door that the shadow is projecting onto the door somewhat, but not
Mhm.
totally. And then here we can do a close up. Then they may be looking slightly up the door, like a
Yeah, I like that.
one guy. Yeah.
Yeah, because that one little section tells such a story already of that, like, you know, just kinda desperation of there nothing is working, no answers have been given, and just can't leave it alone, right? Like, just wake up, go to bed, go back to the door, and then we end up here.
Yeah. See if we can do this. I would almost because it's funny whenever I use perspective grid. Sometimes I find that like I don't have to change the perspective because I can
Mhm.
use it for other panels, right? So now I'm seeing the door, uh, almost like they're looking up at the door. So this top, see if we have 2 through here, I should connect this. That'll work. I always make sure that if on what happens on 2, if I have like an open panel or a bleed to the edge, then on the other panel, it doesn't do the same thing because then it makes it look like it's one big
Right.
panel. So we're okay here because page 2 doesn't really have it's all pretty closed.
Mhm.
And then page 3, we have panel 1 is open and the last whatever you want to call this one is open as well. So that it's not gonna interfere in any way with previous panel. That's, again, one of the beauties of working this size. You can kinda see very quickly what things look like, and therefore, you can make sure things work, or if they're not working, you can change them very quickly from, like, a open panel or a closed panel or whatever it is you wanna do.
And just looking right now at the 3 pages, like, next to each other small, I love that the energy change from 1 to 3 is huge. And just in every aspect of it, which was really what we were trying to achieve, is that each page kinda told a big piece of the story, and we had to move really quickly from a, pretty stable person moving into a new place excited to somebody who was willing to, do what ends up happening. And you
Mhm.
really see that happening just from the energies on each page really, really change, which is exactly what we set to do.
Yeah, and sometimes this is subconscious, but so in the last panel too, we have pretty much for the first time, uh, uh, Sam's breaking out of the panel. I mean, they
Mhm.
do it in one, kind of, but not so much that it's very noticeable. This is very noticeable, and that almost creates it's a cliffhanger, which is what you wanna do from page to page, so it almost, like, makes it, "Oh, we're breaking out of the panel now, we're getting a
Yeah.
little bit more chaotic," and then look at page 3, and it's getting pretty chaotic.
Yes, exactly, and that shift from page to page is exactly what we had hoped for, which is, how do we move from calm through all these emotions in a very, very tight story, and the look on Sam's face and, the bottom of page 3 really tells where their mental state is at this point in the story, and it is not good.
Yeah, exactly, and I told you before, I'd never really done that whole emotional or kind of
Mhm.
setting up each page before we even get to script for like what is the emotional state, what's the resonance we want to get from
Yeah.
each page, and doing it that way I may do this from now on, or talk about it with other creators I work with to go, hey, like what how do we want this to like, how
Mhm.
do we want people to feel throughout all these pages versus because it'll mimic the if they're in a higher stage of anxiety on page 3, then what's happening around them may reflect that visually, right?
Exactly, and with that in mind, that, makes decisions about the shapes of the panels and if they, are closed or open and stuff like that, and you can see that not only the individual drawings, but the actual feel of the way the page is set up varies based on the emotional state. So, it was an interesting exercise to do that and then see how that actually works and comes to life, and we can actually see how each page does fit into those emotional states, in every aspect, which I think is pretty cool.
So have you done that before when you're doing other types of stories?
Depends on the type of story, and depends on the length of the story, but, like, for, longer things, overall of, like, the entire sort of section, like a chapter or whatever, like, what is sort of how we're starting and how we're ending this from an emotional standpoint, and also for picture books, right? Because sometimes each page has to leave a very specific feel for the person reading it. This is the first time I've done it in such a contained way with it being just 6 pages, but it really helped me to figure out how we were gonna move through a story, um, in this amount of time and get somebody from, well-rounded, starting off a new life to complete breakdown so quickly.
Yeah. I'm trying to when I'm doing this, I'm also trying to be spontaneous.
Mhm.
So, like those lines that are kind of zigzagging around, I hadn't thought of them until just a moment ago. And I'm like, ooh, this kind of makes it feel chaotic too.
Yeah.
So,
It feels motion, right? It feels like a little bit like Sam has been, like, you know, right up against the door, banging on it, like something is happening, right? It doesn't feel static.
yeah. Okay, good. Well, that's always a good thing if whatever you're doing is creating a more dynamic looking
Mhm.
or panel or page or whatever it is, right? So, um, I'm playing around with that here. It's just a lot of fun to be able to work on the fly and not
Mhm.
think too much about it, but because you really already have like a sense of the story, which is always, as I said before, having that like emotional state, then
Mhm.
I can just
Yeah, and that's what this
Play.
feels like. It does feel like that, like, obsession, right? Like, this page, if you had to describe it in one word, that would be it. Like, everything that's happening is within that, like, feeling of Sam being absolutely, like, obsessed and the mental health just eroding rapidly.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Um, so you can see I'm now even having, Sam, like, clawing at the door, kind of like grabbing the handle of the doorknob and then clawing or something like that, just as like a it's almost very Shakespearean, like there's some kind of soliloquy that's
Mhm.
happening at the moment, while they're, doing this, right? While they're, scratching at the door. I don't know what's being said, but I just feel like something might be said.
Yeah, and I feel like Sam doesn't even know what's being said. Like, there's almost like an animalistic thing happening at this point, right? Where it's like so deep in it that it's just like, as we start to see on page 4, kind of noises and grunts and stuff like that are starting to take over because Sam has sort of lost all control, and reality, right? Like, there's a big break from reality that's happened where, it's a door, whatever, move on with your life. It's like, no, this door is now Sam's life, period.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, no, that this is, uh, having somebody here, I'm gonna say it again. It may not be ideal, it may not work with everybody, but if you have somebody that you can work with pretty closely, that you trust, that's not gonna, like, hinder, but it's gonna enhance the
Mhm.
process, if you can find that person, figure out if you can do something like this where you have, at least at this early stage,
Yeah.
where you can make changes pretty quickly, without, like, lots of like, redos, right? Um,
Well, and
it,
that's the
it's
problem with a lot of times is it ends up being after the fact, right? You get it to a point you're happy and you share it with the person you're working with, and changes can be harder at that point, right? It can be a little bit more locked, a little bit more final because you want to make sure you get it to a state that they can understand and they can work with. And sometimes that ends up being more work to make these changes. And also, like, what you were just doing, I'm just going to try something. Let me know what you think. Isn't necessarily something you do if you have to then, finalize it, write up an email, send it to somebody, wait for their feedback. You don't try some of these things because it's just not a format that's conducive to that.
Yeah. Well, actually, that's not 100% true. That because I work digitally and I do share my
Fair.
screen, I can do a so not quite like this, but you've witnessed it where I've shared my screen and we've
Yeah.
gone through like the refined thumbnails. But the
Yes.
difference, what I'm trying to say, the difference is that I don't have somebody along the way, like while I'm working on them, talking me through things kind of like a Jiminy Cricket, like,
Yeah.
giving me like, "Well, why don't you try this?" Or "Have you no, this is working," or "I'm not sure I'm
Yes.
understanding what I'm seeing here." And then you're like,
Yes.
"Oh, okay, I see what you're," and then because you can do it on the fly, there's no
Yeah.
big
No, it's very
surprise there.
different. Exactly, and then also, like, for both sides of it, I know exactly where you went and why, right? So I'm not being like, "Did you think this or did you try this?" Or you're like, "We know we tried it," you know? There are certain things that I suggested that were not gonna work, and we discussed it, and we moved on from it, and that's great. I'd rather that, right? Because then at least it's like we already had that conversation. We know that that idea wasn't gonna be feasible, so great, we talked about it, moving on.
Yeah, versus I've already gone through, and then you're like, "So,
"What
as I'm
about
looking through
this?"
this here," and I'm like, it's not gonna quite work the way you'd like it to," and
Yeah.
then I have
"Now I
to
gotta show
show
it
you
to
why.
you." Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it's definitely different when it's not in real time.
yeah. So, I mean, I don't know how many writers are gonna, or collaborators are gonna actually take the time to go, "Sure, I've got a couple hours every week to sit and kind of hold your hand in regards to what you're working on and making sure everything works." I mean, I'm being a little bit facetious there, but I mean, it is kind of
It
what you
depends
are
what you're
doing
trying to
anyway.
do as well, right? Like, there's a big difference, we've talked about it before, being, like, collaborators versus, like, work for hire, right? So when it's like,
Yeah.
we've made this together from step 1 all the way through versus me being like, "Okay, I wrote this, here's all my panel descriptions, go off and illustrate." that's a very different working relationship, but if you truly wanna be collaborative with somebody, this is a really fun way to actually truly do that. Like, this it
Yeah.
feels like something we created together versus, "This is my part, that's your part."
Yeah, and that's an important element too. If you're work for hire, really you aren't necessarily going to want to take all that extra time
Yeah.
for that kind of input. Um, Nor is the writer going to want to, right? But uh, like the bottom line of what I'm teaching or what we're talking about is that these thumbnails, these refined thumbnails, should be clear enough that we've got an extra guest there. There we go. Um, it should be clear enough that they'll have an understanding because they'll know what the script is, that they'll be know what they're looking at. Um,
Yes.
like I would, arguably speaking, if I were to show this to you, not have you watching me as I did this, I may even go even further into detail with this,
Mhm.
only for the fact that I don't want there to be any surprises. You're watching as I'm doing this. There's going to be absolutely no surprise for you.
Yes.
But if I have my client and I want to show them what I've worked on in this thumbnail stage, I want to make sure they know exactly what's happening. They can see the details of whatever it is that the characters are known
Mhm.
for. They can see where the light and the form and all that kind of stuff very clearly because I wouldn't want them to then see a finished page because that's often where I go once I've shown the thumbnails. I consider my thumbnails to be either rough pencil, right, or very, very refined thumbnail, somewhere in there. And so
Yes.
because of that, I wanna make 100% sure that the person who's looking at it goes, "Yeah, I see what's happening here. That's very clear to me. I get it's rough, but I know exactly." And then when I do the finish, which is next, the finished page, there's no big surprise going, "Wait a second, I didn't realize that this was happening to this
Yeah.
character." Right?
No, exactly, and that was kind of the point that I was making earlier, was just that it does require an extra level on the part of the illustrator to truly ensure nothing gets lost in translation when you're sending something off, even screen sharing, if they haven't been part of the process, right? Because you do wanna make sure that nothing is a surprise, or you thought of it one way, they thought of it a different way, if you haven't sort of been there to sort of see how you got to where you got to.
Yeah. Exactly. So now I think this is at a pretty good stage. I'll remove the perspective and you can see the
Yeah.
first 3 pages here. They're pretty clear. Again, if you've been watching along, you'll kind of know what you're looking at. And as I said before, I would if this is for a client, I'd probably go a little bit more. I would arguably zoom in and go into even more detail. Um, and just like make sure that you can see the fingers a little bit more clearly and you can see the face and stuff like that. But I'm not going to do that for this because I just think then you're going to see that again when we get to rough pencils. So it's a little bit for me. It's more of like it's partially a crutch, partially just to be sure that I have my client understanding what's going to happen because I do go to a finished stage after. Now, that if that doesn't work in your process, if you wanna show your client like a more refined pencil stage versus like a finished stage, that's up to you, and I know that there's some creators that do that. I don't just because I I'm trying to save time for me and my client. It's also one of those things where I hope that the client, will trust from the whole process that
Mhm.
um, we've created something that they understand. There's going to be no surprises, and for the most part, that's happened. I haven't really had too many issues in the past where I've had a client make a lot of changes in the finished. Only when it's like very specific things. It's usually on the client's part where they're like, "Oh, I made a mistake here."
Yeah, I didn't
I
notice this earlier, or I added
Yeah.
something. Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Well, that was pages 1 through 3, so we will be back to continue on. But thank you so much for watching, and make sure to subscribe and catch up on previous episodes, and we will see you on the next one. Thank you.
Thank you.